Lore Master Jito here. I'm the librarian of Azeroth, and I'm bringing you the lore straight from the books. And today, I'm also bringing you lore from some well-researched sources. Not only am I going to read every single book in the A Steamy Romance Novel series, but I'm going to give you all the lore behind them too. The Steamy Romance Novel series mainly follows a human paladin named Marcus and his, adventures. He is speculated to be based on the High Commander of Stormwind Defense, Marcus Jonathan. However, if we head over to High Mountain in Legion, we witness two Tauren, Tanda and Bax, asleep on the floor. As we approach, a man looking strikingly like Marcus Jonathan, also named Marcus, gets up and says, "Well, that's unexpected," and walks away, leaving behind a silver necklace in a steamy jewelry box. The events witnessed are the exact same characters and details from A Steamy Romance Novel Got Milk. High Commander Marcus Jonathan, however, was killed in action during Mists of Pandaria in the Theramore mana bomb, so this Marcus of the books from Legion cannot be the same man. But why does he look so similar? Well, the King of Warcraft lore himself, Noble87, did a romance novel video in 2015, and he created the character of Marcus to look like High Commander Marcus Jonathan. In homage, Blizzard made the canon Marcus from High Mountain look just like Noble's Marcus, and that's where we currently are with who the main character is. Thank you, Tarlook Storm and Salma on the Wowhead forums. 3 other characters act as protagonists throughout the series as well. In Big Brass Bombs, we meet Revi, likely based on Revi Ramrod, the riding trainer in Orgrimmar, getting ready for a date with Sir Marcus herself. 2 other male protagonists of unknown origin make an appearance, a dwarf named Sir Crispin Greymane and an undead named Lord Crispin Gravesbane. Why is there a dwarf with the last name Greymane? Why are both their names so similar? My research has turned up empty. I'd love to hear your theories in the comments below. Now, let's talk about who wrote these books. In Warlords of Draenor, an NPC was added in Northshire Abbey named Jeremiah Seeley, who, when asking for inspiration, tells you the last time he had an idea, it was stolen and made into a disturbing romance novel. The NPC is based on the real-life Jeremy Seeley, who was a technical writer at Blizzard. As for who the mysterious idea-thieving author is, there are 2 who lay claim to writing the books. Bill Spearshaker in Ironforge and Francis Sir Bacon in Undercity. And yes, those are plays on William Shakespeare and Sir Francis Bacon. They're wearing identical outfits, right down to the glasses, and both Bill and Francis claim to be the author of the Steamy Romance novels, and they claim the other stole their work. This actually mirrors a real-life theory that Sir Francis Bacon wrote Shakespeare's plays. I'm inclined to believe that Bill Spearshaker is the actual author, not because of an alliance bias, but Bill actually uses the books to send coded messages between SI7 and the Explorers League, and he makes money from the sales of the books. Reading directly from Wowpedia, regarding the real-life book Exploring Azeroth, The Eastern Kingdoms by Christy Golden, the novels are indirectly used in the secret communication between the Explorers League and the SI7. In order to get the title of one of the encoded books guarded by Bill Spearshaker in the Ironforge library, SI7 agents need to quote a title from one of the Steamy Romance novels. Matthias Shaw suspects that Bill does this both to sell more books and because he enjoys seeing the discomfort on Shaw's face. Both Bill Spearshaker and Francis Sir Bacon, as of Legion, claim that they are retired. This is discovered through an inscription questline that rewards the toy Steamy Romance Novel kit, where they instruct you to write your own now. After Legion, there appears to be a new author, Noah Scribeson. He was originally named Lawrence E. Craft at Battle for Azeroth's launch, a reference to a former senior game designer, Jonathan LeCraft. LeCraft was let go in 2021, and Lawrence's name was changed to Noah. A huge thank you to Dagger's Edge on Wowhead for that author information. You could actually go to Borealis and meet him at his book signing. Along the table outside the inscription shop, pick up a copy of the book Stormy Seas. It is strange though because the cover is identical to Savage Passions. Anyway, take the book up to him and he will sign it for you. You can also find Noah on the Dragon Isles in Valdrakken, giving a reading on his newest book, The Lusty Draconian Mage. You can loot a copy of it off the table and ask him to sign that for you as well. So now we're going to read the books, and we are going in publishing order, starting with the originally titled A Steamy Romance Novel from Burning Crusade, followed by 2 published in Wrath of the Lich King, Northern Exposure, and Forbidden Love. Then Mists of Pandaria gave us Hot and Misty and I'm in Love with a Robot, followed by Savage Passions from Warlords of Draenor. A romance novel boom happened in Legion with 6 new titles: Big Brass Bombs, Got Milk, Of Elven Bondage, Blue Moon, Waves of Desire, and Nightborne of the Living Dead. The next book, Stormy Seas, came out in Battle for Azeroth, plus an unnamed book the Tortolans know about. And last but certainly not least, Dragonflight bestowed upon us the most recent book, The Lusty Draconian Mage. Okay, get a towel ready, and if you don't know what that means, you're too young to be here. Please exit this video stage right by clicking on the History of Magic books up top here. For the rest of you, buckle in. Several of these may make you blush, but mostly they'll make you cringe. A Steamy Romance Novel. As Nani glided up, the grizzled warrior gave her a hard stare. I suppose you're here to collect the reward for killing those murlocs. Her eyes wandered down to the glowing broadsword at his side. That depends on what the reward is, Marcus. She twirled her hair playfully, pretending not to notice how he shifted uncomfortably in her presence. I may not want it. Marcus stepped toward her, bristling with a mixture of fear and anger. The reward is not negotiable. He paused for a moment while gathering his nerve and pressed himself against her diminutive form. Their lips met hotly, melting her frost armor spell in a torrent of sweltering vapor. So, is there another step to this quest? She teased, her eyes glittering with excitement. This goes on for several hundred more pages without advancing the plot. A Steamy Romance Novel, Northern Exposure. The tiny gnome peered over the railing into the secluded Dalaran courtyard. The view from the balcony is amazing. You have to come see. Armor leg plates creaked as Marcus walked over, taking in a deep breath as he absently scratched his scruffy chin. The hero's welcome is no slouch, and there's something in the room that might interest you. Tavi bounded into the room, pausing only a moment before jumping onto the massive bed. She turned to gaze at Marcus with her huge saucer-like eyes, narrowing them playfully and replacing her glowing smile with a diabolical grin. Interested in some more company? She purred as her hands weaved through a complex summoning ritual, stopping only when she felt the warmth of a new presence behind her. All color drained from Marcus's face as he struggled to protest. I don't think that's appropriate. Confused, Tavi turned to see what was wrong. A hideous fellhound stood ready, drooling onto the floor as it stared intently at the half-armored paladin. No, that's not what I meant, she stammered as she dispelled the hungry demon. I'm sorry, that's not really my specialization. Marcus took both of her hands in one of his as he reassured her. It's fine. What is your specialization? Her head snapped up, eyes burning with renewed life as shadowy energy channeled through her hands into Marcus, dropping him to his knees in agony. Affliction, actually. Gritting his teeth, Marcus gestured as light flashed over him, restoring his strength. Tavi stared anxiously as he rose to his full height, engulfing her in his shadow. He thrust his hand forward, sending a wave of righteous force through her. Her eyes rolled back as she wavered for several seconds before regaining consciousness. The mischievous smirk returned to her face. Well then, this is going to be fun. The remaining pages have a level 999 requirement to read. A Steamy Romance Novel, Forbidden Love. Atuza crept silently through the massive underground tunnel, nervously looking over her shoulder in anticipation of the fast-moving tram. Where is he? She muttered angrily, stopping suddenly as something moved behind her. Her eyes narrowed dangerously as her dagger slid from its sheath. A husky voice echoed in the hollow chamber. I thought rogues liked to be behind their target. She spun quickly, driving her blade into a shield of impenetrable force. And I thought paladins were supposed to be chased, she replied with a confident smirk. Leaning forward, she counted out loud until the invisible bubble dissipated with an audible pop. 12 seconds. I know you have abilities that last longer than that. Bony fingers worked effortlessly beneath his armor, unlatching his breastplate and exposing him to the cold air. Don't worry, my sweet Marcus. That's not a finishing move tonight. I'm just getting started. He wrapped his arms around what remained of her waist, forcing an excited giggle as he nibbled at her neck vertebrae. The rest of the book has several sections that are apparently worn out from repeated readings. A steamy romance novel, hot and misty. Marcus galloped on his warhorse towards the remote building, bringing an almost imperceptible flush to one of the curvier guards as he passed. He dismounted and handed his reins to the ever-present stablemaster, placing one hand on her shoulder before speaking. "Kama, have you considered our last conversation?" Marcus asked, furrowing his eyebrows in mock seriousness. Kama rolled her eyes, her Pandaren markings exaggerating the movement. "I doubt my life mate would think much of it." Marcus let out a bellowing laugh, looking over his shoulder as he walked away. "I'd still like to meet her one day." The tavern in the mists was unusually crowded, and he pushed his way through the crowd until he stood in the shadows of a dark corner. An exotic voice purred his name. "Marcus, it is good to see you again." Marcus smiled and squinted as his eyes adjusted to the absence of light. "Madame Goya, the pleasure is all mine." She dipped in a polite bow. Marcus felt a sudden warmth as he was reminded why the term bouncy was often used to describe the Pandaren. He bowed in kind, catching Madame Goya's hand and kissing it gently, never shifting his gaze from the hulking bodyguard standing behind her, a single scar between his watchful eyes. "So, Marcus, can I interest you in something special? I'm afraid the usual cannot be offered today." Marcus did not miss her emphasis on the usual, nor the deep regret that laced her words. Their eyes met once again, and she squeezed his hand before letting go. "If that is your will, may I see what you have to offer?" Marcus asked. "There are several magnificent pieces of armor, a tiny companion, and even an exotic mount," Madame Goya answered, her typical playfulness quickly returning. She paused and held a hand to her chin, feigning thoughtfulness. "But my most valuable treasures are located upstairs." Marcus's eyebrows lifted comically, and his eyes widened before his expression settled into gleeful acceptance. "Until we meet again, then." Her eyes fluttered, and Marcus found himself walking up the stairs of the strange tavern. Waiting in the room at the top were two beings of such beauty that he nearly stumbled on the final step. One had long flowing hair, the color of the sunwell itself, and the other kept her ebon hair cropped short. After several long moments of wordless, lust-filled glances, a realization struck him. He was looking into the face of the enemy. He unsheathed his mighty sword, bathing the blood elves in its pulsating glow. The elf with radiant hair spoke first. "Goodness, it looks like someone is ready for battle." She placed her hand on the tip of the sword, lowering it with gentle pressure, as she crossed in front of him, always keeping her head cocked in his direction. "Do you believe in love at first sight, or should I walk by again?" Marcus leaned in close, carelessly pressing the hardened steel against her. He whispered something quietly in her ear and pulled away, eagerly searching her face for a reaction. No, I won't do that." "But my sister will," the blonde giggled. The dark-haired one silently raised a single eyebrow, nodding and shrugging her delicate shoulders at the same time. With a subtle gesture, her body glowed with an intense inner fire, burning away what little clothing she wore. As Marcus's muscular arms wrapped around her, she whispered something to him. A symbol, unseen by Marcus, momentarily appeared above his head and surrounded him in a white glow. That feels amazing. What did you do?" he asked. "Fortitude, my lord. You will need it." It was then that he noticed she was literally levitating off the ground, weightless in his arms. His mind began to spin as countless scenarios played out in his head. His strong hands began to. The remaining pages are shrouded in mist. The Tavern of the Mists is a real place, located in the veiled stare of Mists of Pandaria. Kama, also known as Beast Tamer Kama, is the stable master there. Kama mentions she has a wife, and I love the fan theory that her wife's name is Sutra. It'd fit well with this line of books. But of course, we don't have enough evidence to see if the wife is really in the game. But Madame Goya also exists, and she's the leader of the black market. In Mists, she was located just outside the tavern, but the guard there now states that she has moved on to more lucrative ventures. She's currently in Dornegal. As for the Blood Elf sisters, there is an upstairs to the Tavern of the Mists, but not actually a room, and definitely not soundproofed enough for Marcus's favorite activity. Poor Rathian downstairs would be able to hear everything. A steamy romance novel, I'm in love with a robot. 2 versions of this book exist, and neither of them can be read, unfortunately. The first edition came out in Mists of Pandaria, received from a Blingtron 4000 gift package. This book states that the pages are too heavily smudged with oil to read. Now, I have some questions for Blingtron, but none I want the answers to. The second edition came out in Warlords of Draenor, looted from a chest in Talador called Ketya's Stash. This copy is mint condition and reads like a highly technical schematic. Also inside this stash of hers is a battle pet called Stone Grinder. And, you can draw your own conclusions, but you might want to bleach your new battle pet before learning it. Ketya Shred Iron does exist. She's the principal engineer for the Iron Horde, having come to Draenor with the Black Fuse Goblins alongside Garish Hellscream. She can be found nearby in Turum during the Battle for Shattrath questline. A steamy romance novel, Savage Passions. A trail of dust followed the once white stallion as he galloped through the garrison gates, stopping abruptly at the stables. Raven, the stable master, rushed to the weary mount and rider. "Lord Marcus, let me help." Raven's strong, tanned arm took the rider's hand in his own, pulling him off in a quick, smooth motion. He did not immediately let go, staring in disbelief at the paladin's heavily stained armor. Seeing concern on the man's face, Marcus clasped his shoulder and smiled warmly. "Fear not, old friend, only a little of it is my own." Raven hugged him fiercely. "That is good to hear." Yes, I'm fine. The journey was long and often hard, but I have returned victorious," Marcus exclaimed as he pulled a bulging sack from beneath his armor, placing it gingerly in Raven's rough, steady hands. The inquisitive stablemaster cupped the bag, squeezing gently to discern the contents without unwrapping the package. "Don't be coy, you know what's in there. But I have something even better for you," Marcus said with a knowing smile. Raven closed his eyes. He held out his hands and spoke calmly. "Give it to me, please." His arms flexed slightly as he felt something heavy, strangely warm, and smooth along its length. "Oh, this is... familiar. Okay, yes, I know that part. An enchanted sword." Raven released the glowing weapon from one hand, letting it swing in front of him. Marcus looked down and raised his eyebrows. "I'm glad you like it. Certainly not the first you've held." "Never one like this," Raven replied with a wink. "We need to work on that grip. It's too tight. Perhaps you have time for some practice?" Marcus asked, peering into Raven's dark brown eyes. Raven grinned. "I'll go tie up your horse." The remaining pages are not yet written. It appears to be a work in progress. A steamy romance novel, Big Brass Bombs. The tough little goblin walked purposefully into the engineering shop, raising her eyebrows at a few items as she approached the shopkeeper. "How's it going, Jack?" Her voice seductively brushed his pointy ears with the rough texture of someone who inhaled too much motorcycle exhaust. The goblin called Jack looked up and grinned. "Revy! It's going much better since you just arrived." Jack set his Arclight spanner on the table. "What can I do you for?" Holding her elbow in one hand, Revy tapped her chin lightly. "I'm not real sure. You got any specials?" "Are you kidding? I've got the best deals anywhere," Jack replied enthusiastically. "Just got these in this morning, in all sorts of colors. Small red rockets, got some in blue and green too." Revy's disappointed look was not missed by the expert shopkeeper, and he quickly upped the ante. There was a loud thud as Jack dropped something on the table. "I call it the big one," he said. "It's goblin only, very difficult to find." "Nice, very nice," Revy said, sounding unconvinced. Her eyes wandered a bit. "Okay, fine. I can see you're a goblin of superb taste." Jack looked around conspiratorially before carefully laying out a new item, buckling the table with an ominous creak. "It's called," Jack paused for dramatic effect, "the bigger one." Revy's eyes widened in surprise. Is it real?" Feeling the advantage, Jack allowed himself to relax a bit. Putting his hands behind his head and leaning back in his chair, he replied with lazily narrowed eyes. "It's 100% goblin parts, baby. Natural resources." After a moment of hesitation, Revi reached out and gingerly stroked the smooth yellow surface. "I'll take 2. "Excellent. You know, if you like that, you might be interested in some hardened adamantite tubes. They can enhance the effect." Revi nodded excitedly and looked behind Jack at something on the wall. "What is that?" Jack looked over his shoulder. "Oh, those are for reviving dead people." Revi was intrigued. Can they be used on someone while they're still alive? Never wanting to miss a sale, Jack responded without missing a beat. "Oh sure, tell you what, you get all this stuff and I'll throw in a pair of Mayhem protection goggles for half price." Revi pulled out a sack of coins that made Jack drool. Why not? Motorcycle sales have been good this year. As Jack quickly tallied the total, he asked, "This must be a serious raid or something?" Revi shrugged. "Nah, I got a blind date with a guy named Marcus tonight." Jack nodded. "What about that guy from the motor club you was dating?" The leather-clad goblin scooped up her bag with one arm and held up an outstretched hand. "He never put a ring on it. A girl's gotta have her priorities." Jack smiled and shook his head as he watched her walk out of the shop. The remaining pages require a secret goblin decoder ring to read. We've covered Revi already as the riding trainer in Orgrimmar, but Jack is real too. Pysurek Slamfist, who goes by Jack, is the engineering trainer in Orgrimmar. And this book has an Easter egg. The "put a ring on it" line in this book is actually a direct reference to the female goblin dance, which is Beyoncé's All the Single Ladies. A steamy romance novel. Got milk? So there I was, surrounded by at least 100 murlocs, the heavily mustached man proclaimed, gesturing in a wide arc. The tawny Tauren gasped in amazement. "Whatever did you do?" Her voice had a brawny, muscular tone to it. "The only thing I could do, my lovely." Marcus patted the sword resting on his thigh. "I brought them to justice." "Oh? With just a dagger? You're so brave!" Tanda cautiously reached for the blade, but pulled her hand away at the last second. Marcus bristled. "What? This is a two-handed sword, enchanted to the hilt. Perhaps not as big as you've seen, but I know a few tricks to really make it sing." Tanda smiled demurely, fluttering her enormous eyelashes. She picked up a piece of cheese and held it close to Marcus's lips. "Try this, it's homemade." The handsome paladin stammered, No, I'm, lactose intolerant." Tanda placed the cheese back in the bowl. "Oh, are you sure? Does that mean you can't tolerate me?" The buxom Tauren stepped forward, pressing herself against Marcus. The substantial height difference placed his face squarely in her chest. Unable to see, he flailed in protest, finally finding purchase on her firm backside. His muffled, apologetic sounds only made her giggle and squeeze him more tightly. Just as his other hand found her tail, the light dimmed as an imposing figure moved into the doorway. "What the?" Tanda exclaimed. "Bax, no!" Marcus pulled his head away and gasped for air, looking at the angry Tauren with wide eyes. "It's not what it looks like!" Bax charged, ramming into Marcus while uttering his challenge. "You mess with the bull, you get the horns!" Marcus reeled and caught himself, digging his heel into the dirt. Seizing a horn in each hand, he held the Tauren's head down, fighting against his tremendous strength. Bax forced his head up, grunting and spitting in anger, only to have it repeatedly pushed down. They locked eyes for a moment, and with a final heave of explosive force, Bax wrenched himself free. The powerful Tauren swung his arms out wide, as if to crush Marcus in a mighty hug. "Blades of light," proclaimed the paladin. A huge, pulsing sword thrust up from the ground between the two combatants, tearing through armor and clothing, searing the thick chest hair of Marcus, and cutting a fine line into the Tauren's muscular chest. Before they could move again, Tanda raised her hoofed leg into the air and brought it down with warlike force. The man and bull wobbled, clearly stunned. "Stop it, both of you!" Marcus regained his composure and looked at Tanda, and then to Bax. Fur was ruffled, and the bare parts of their leathery skin glistened with sweat. As they all stared one another down, the ridiculously good-looking Marcus spoke. "Well, since we're mostly undressed already." The story goes on, but your good taste prevents you from reading it. I've already covered Tanda and Bax, asleep on a 10th floor behind Thunder Totem in High Mountain. Note that they both have the last name Freeseeker. We can infer from the story that they are most likely a married couple, which would explain Bax's rage and Tanda's defensiveness. Also, homemade cheese? Ugh. A steamy romance novel of Elven Bondage. The weight of his fist crashed into the side of the ogre's face with a meaty thunk. The bulbous goon teetered for a moment like a marionette cut loose from its strings before falling into a heap atop his unconscious sibling. The Drechtooth brothers may have been feared throughout the land, but the courage of Sir Crispin Greymane had won the day once again. The brave hero had no time to pause and admire his handiwork, not when Lady Moonshade remained shackled to the wall. Greymane strode to her side, each step as graceful as a ram of Dunmorrow. "You are unhurt, my lady? I trust these brutes did not cause you harm." She breathed a relieved sigh as he broke away the bonds that held wrists and ankles. "Your swift arrival saw to that, noble champion," she answered. The night elf's glowing eyes beamed upon him like stars on a cloudless night. The greatest suffering was enduring the ogre's lecherous glances. My leather armor was damaged during my capture, and several pieces seemed to have fallen away. She made a half-hearted attempt to cover the bareness of her taut midriff. Of course, a knight performing his duty would not notice such a quandary, he assured her, taking her hand and lightly massaging her bruised wrist as she rose to her feet. Standing her full height, Lady Moonshade was at least 3 heads taller than her savior, if not more. She puzzled at him a moment. "Forgive me, good sir, but I cannot discern if you are the shortest human I have ever met or the tallest dwarf." His white teeth flashed through the thickness of his beard like snowcaps on a mountain ridge. "I like to think I'm the best of both, good lady." He gestured toward the doorway. "A spacious carriage awaits to convey you back home. I assure you my driver will not disturb you as I personally see to your recovery. I will do my best to ensure the ride is to your liking." A playful smile danced about her lips. "I hope I can rely upon your driver's discretion. I fear the rest of my fragile armor might fall away at any moment." The ruggedly handsome knight bowed and flashed a confident wink. "Why, my dear, I'm positively counting on it." "Oh, Sir Greymane!" she swooned, falling into his arms. He guided her toward the waiting coach, stepping over the unconscious ogres on the floor. The story continues for many more chapters, laden with vehicle metaphors. While I can't find evidence of a dwarf in-game named Crispin Greymane, there are several night elves with the last name Moonshade. If we take into account that this book came out in Legion, there is one night elf with that name in that expansion. She is Sentinel Moonshade, stationed just outside the walls of Suramar in stealth mode. A steamy romance novel, Blue Moon. Tail swooshing and hips swaying, the curvy figure walked purposefully across the lake toward the man resting by the shore. Rising quickly as she approached, he appeared visibly happy to be in her presence. Blue arms flowed over his shoulders as the smooth tail coiled seductively around his waist. "Why must I travel so far to be meeting man like you?" Her voice carried a strong, alluring accent. Grinning wildly, he gently pushed her away, openly staring as the light caught her features. "Up here!" she exclaimed in playful anger. With a helpless shrug, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small pouch. "My wonderful Sula, I've brought you something." Confidence wrapped his words like a steel blanket. She plucked the tiny bag from his hands, excitedly pulling it open and revealing a citrine pendant. "Oh, Marcus, you shouldn't have." The usual teasing was gone from his voice. "Every facet lights the sky, and my heart with your beautiful reflection." Sula frowned. No, I meant you really shouldn't have. I could craft something better by accident." For the first time, possibly ever, Marcus looked hurt. His shoulders slumped slightly, the cocky, ever-present grin missing from his handsome face. Sula opened her mouth to speak, smiling warmly. A glowing rune appeared above her eyes. "I don't think I can mend your feelings, even with my gift." Despite the statement, her words seemed to do the trick. Marcus smirked roguishly as he adjusted his leg plates. "Well, you aren't the only gifted one." Silence penetrated the room with palpable force as the conversation shifted to the language shared by all races of Azeroth. Minutes became hours until their passionate dialogue was interrupted by lightning streaking from the cloudless sky, thunderously slamming into the lake's surface and bathing them in steam. "Is something wrong?" Marcus asked. "No, my Marcus. You're just off to a great start. The remaining pages have been thoroughly destroyed by the elements." A Steamy Romance Novel, Waves of Desire. Lord Gravesbane stared out through the porthole, watching the waves rise and fall in time with the aching that tormented him inside. How long had she kept him waiting here in the cabin of his luxury schooner? He felt the keen edge of his desire growing more insistent, spurring his impatience. At last the cabin door swung open. She paused in the doorway, torchlight playing about the hem of her low-cut silken gown as the shadows danced upon her pale, cinderized skin. "Am I late, my lord?" she asked, chewing on the fullness of her lower lip. He found himself speechless as his jaw dropped to the floor. He knelt to pick it up, rising as he snapped it back in place. "Some things are worth waiting for, Lady Sunskin." He held out his hand, beckoning her closer. For a moment, a look of uncertainty crossed the highborn's brow. Her shallow breaths hung heavy with hesitation and longing. She brushed her fingertips across the cold, pallid skin of his cheek. "I hope your desiccation doesn't hinder your enthusiasm, Lord Gravesbane." He took her hand and kissed it with his one good lip. "Fear not, darling. My jaw isn't what it used to be, but my tongue remains as limber as ever." "Oh, Lord Gravesbane!" she swooned, falling into his arms. He relished the warmth of her skin as he guided her toward the leather harness hanging over his bed. The story continues for many more chapters, laden with porthole puns. A Steamy Romance Novel, Nightborne of the Living Dead. She accepted the chalice of wine with a bat of her long lashes. "I really shouldn't, Lord Gravesbane. My mother would never approve." "Nonsense, my dear Elonia," the nobleman answered. "You are 10,000 years old. I'm sure your mother would forgive you for indulging just this once." She giggled. "It's not the wine, my lord. Rather, it's the notion of a Nightborne spending her evening in the company of someone so charming," he offered. "I was going to say decrepit." "My morals are not quite that far gone, I assure you," he replied, his good eye drifting up and down the length of her flowing gown. "I'm sure your mother would find me most endearing." "Oh, would I?" asked the sharp voice. Crispin Gravesbane turned to see another Nightborne framed within the doorway. Though her attire was less inviting than her daughter's, her face and body were a mirror of Elonia's own. He approached and bowed, hastily kicking aside the kneecap that clattered to the floor. "I am Lord Crispin Gravesbane, at your service. Do I have the honor of meeting Lady Marina?" "You do," she answered coldly, casting a harsh glance toward Elonia. "I fear you are toying with me, good lady," he smiled, careful to hold his jaw in place. "Surely you must be Elonia's sister, not her mother." A faint blush flashed across Lady Marina's cheeks. "You flatter me, my lord." Her voice softened. "It has been centuries since anyone has mistaken us for siblings." "Nonsense," he insisted, taking her hand and guiding her toward the couch. He sat down between the two indigo-skinned elves. "Perhaps after we share a bit of wine, we'll find out what else you and your daughter have in common." "Oh, Lord Gravesbane!" Marina swooned. She took Elonia's hand, sharing a furtive smile with her daughter. "Perhaps it's time we introduced you to the true secrets of the Shelderai." Subsequent pages seem to have been scribbled over in Nightborne profanities. A Steamy Romance Novel, Stormy Seas. Marcus awoke with a grunt, squinting to make out the dark shadows around him. He was sitting on a cold wooden floor, and the air was ripe with the scent of a long night. The room rocked back and forth, or was it just the hangover? "Where am I?" he mumbled to himself. A sultry laugh echoed as a strong, shapely figure moved toward him. Marcus rubbed his eyes and focused his senses. She smelled of leather, salt, and exotic spices. As he looked into the woman's steel-gray eyes, he became aware of the bars between them. "Am I in a cell?" he thought to himself. "Is this one of Madame Goya's rooms?" He mused further. "You're in the brig, in case you haven't figured it out," the voluptuous pirate stated with more than a hint of amusement. Marcus stood shakily, composing himself with a roguish smirk before speaking. "I knew that. It's the brig on a ship. I'm on a ship, of course." The woman leaned in closer, gripping the bars with surprising intensity. "Yes, on a ship. At full mast, apparently," she added, with a flirtatious glance down and then back up to his face. Marcus grinned in response, bowing close enough to whisper through the bars. "Half-mast, although the wind seemed to be strengthening." He blew gently, catching her thick black hair in the seductive currents of his breath. She pulled away with a fleeting glance of reluctance. "I'm just here to see if you wanted dinner." She forced a stale piece of bread through the bars. Marcus plucked the morsel from her hand. "I don't want anything dry right now." He dropped the rigid roll and took her hand, tracing a line from her calloused fingers to the anchor tattooed on her forearm. "Do you have any Kultiran fare? I've heard it's famous for its succulence, a rare pleasure to the tongue." A silence followed his words, interrupted by the sound of the cell door creaking open and a cutlass clattering to the floor. Marcus silently pointed to a belaying pin on the far wall and raised an eyebrow. The broad-shouldered woman purred. "Oh, I'd have never pegged you for that." The rest of the book takes a deep dive into the turbulent seas of passion. About the author. Noah Scribeson has traveled Azeroth in search of unique inspiration for his characters and stories. He claims that research is the key to genuine storytelling and is always willing to go to great lengths to finding the right muse. I did mention this at the beginning of the video, but we learn about the existence of another novel through the Tortollan in Battle for Azeroth. However, upon reading it, it appears to be just a continuation of Stormy Seas. A jewel crafting quest has you interact with either Chronicler Shupa if you're Horde, or Chronicler Tupa if you're Alliance. While asking to borrow a codex, the Chronicler tells you about the romance book. You have the option to interrupt and ask for the codex, or press them for more information on the romance novel. Here's how the conversation and the rest of the story goes. "I was told you came across an earthen codex in your recent travels. Could I please borrow it?" "Why, yes, I did, and quite the read it is. However, I came across other books as well, one you may be more interested in, as it contains a tale of heartbreak and adventure. The protagonist is this man, Marcus, and it follows his tale as he woos women and travels the world. It's quite a naughty read." "That does sound exciting. Tell me more." "Well, it starts off with this Marcus fellow having been captured by pirates. He manages to persuade them to let him out after some time, though. Along the way, the boat is attacked by none other than a kraken. After a lot of fighting and some language not fit for the faint of heart, the ship is brought down and Marcus falls into the briny deep." "Oh, and then what happens?" "Later, he wakes up on the shores of a rather large island. His wounds were wrapped in seaweed, and not too far off, he could hear the most beautiful voice humming a song. When he looked up to see who it was, well, this would never happen in real life, but it was a Naga." "That's crazy, a Naga?" "Very much so. And then the Naga came over and asked how he was feeling, and do you know what he said to her?" Tupa pulls out the book and thumbs through the pages. He clears his throat and begins to recite from the book. "For a moment I thought I was rescued, but staring into those eyes of yours, I'm apparently still lost at sea." And then she flirts back with him. A Naga and a human, conversing and cajoling each other? This is the reason why fiction is so fun to read, wouldn't you agree? While I'd love to hear more, I really would like to get that codex and be on my way. Young shells, always in a hurry. Very well, here's the codex. If you ever want to hear the rest of the story about Marcus, you know where to find me. And last, but certainly not least, a steamy romance novel, The Lusty Draconian Mage. Surrounded on all sides by ravening cultists, our brave hero Marcus finds himself in a situation even his formidable skill and bulging muscles cannot overcome. Sensing that his legendary stamina had run low, the horde closed in for the final blow. Marcus steeled himself to take as many of them with him as possible. "Come on then," he quipped, manfully unafraid even in the face of certain doom. "Don't keep me waiting." Just as their charge was about to hit home, the world erupted into searing heat and blazing light. As the flames receded and the firestorm passed, Marcus found himself standing alone, blinking in a field of ash. The crunch of fresh char and a low, feminine chuckle revealed the presence of his savior. Turning, he found himself approached by a vision as beauteous as his prior situation had been grim. Wrapped in a daringly cut robe that clung tightly to her figure and revealed much of her flawless, if unusually red-tinged skin, his savior picked her way across the charred ground. He watched as her fingers deftly slid along the shaft of what was unmistakably a mage's staff. "Thank you, my lady," Marcus said as he bowed, his eyes trailing along her shapely form as he slowly straightened, and his gaze reached a face that was as lovely as it was unconcerned by the destruction she had just unleashed. A pair of sweeping horns top-sprouted from her head, which only added to the heady mix of grandeur and danger. It seemed a waste to lose such a fine, heroic specimen such as yourself to this rabble, she responded, her gaze wandering unabashedly. You showed such impressive skill and stamina during the battle that I could not help but intervene. Her skin flushed an even richer shade of red as her inspection continued. If there is anything I or Drake Piercer here can do for you, we are in your debt, he stated, subtly flexing muscles toned from years of adventuring as he sheathed his long blade home with a single thrust. Anything, she replied huskily, as her yellow eyes twinkled mischievously at the naming of his sword. Anything, he confirmed. I never leave a debt unsatisfied, he continued while raising a calloused hand to gently stroke the generous curves of her horns, the rough texture scraping along his skin. Shuddering lightly at his touch, she pursed her lips enticingly for a long moment before blowing a stream of crimson fire out across our hero. Shocked, Marcus felt not the searing pain he had expected, but a gentle, invigorating warmth as the tongues of flame licked across his chiseled body. It heated his road-stained leathers and caressed the tanned flesh beneath. Much better, she purred, slowly eyeing him from top to bottom. The breath of a red dragoness can bring life as easily as take it. I trust my flame has not harmed you? On the contrary, Marcus replied, as her hot breath played teasingly across his skin. I feel positively filled with life. Stepping forward, she pressed herself against the knight and grabbed the hilt of his sword appreciatively. Let's see how fierce your weapon truly is, hero. The book quickly abandons even the flimsy excuse for a plot it had maintained up until this point. And that is all the lore we know about the Steamy Romance novels and the entire adventures therein. Please let me know the book you loved the most and the one that made you cringe the hardest. For me, that was both of the Lord Crispin Gravesbane books. Ugh. As always, let me know your thoughts on the lore we uncovered today in the comments below. If you're craving more lore, here's a few recommendations from the collection to browse. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to activate your library card and check out more books with me, the Librarian of Azeroth. Thanks for watching.